and the first one is hope, right? So this one is all about hope. And so that's one of the words I want you to remember today is hope. And kind of today, the word that's opposite of hope is scattered, right? When we feel kind of scattered. And where we're getting that word scattered from is from right before our reading today was Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 1. Woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. So scattered. So, in the Advent Christmas season that we are in, do you ever feel scattered? Just a little bit? You ever feel like you don't have enough arms to get everything done? You ever feel like you don't have enough time? That you feel like you're having to go to this party, to that party, to this gathering, to this thing, and then the church wants to do carols and chrismons, and you got to come to that now because the pastor will guilt you into it, and you're going all of these different things, right? And all this different stuff, and you just feel like you're scattered all over the place, right? Like when. That happens to me too. About 4 years ago, maybe 5 now, I went up to Coley and I said, I don't want to go back to Atlanta for Thanksgiving. All right? Well, here's the reason why. Especially this church, it's a little more chill, but the last church, it was in Arkansas. It was like Advent and Christmas season went a whole nother level. It was like if they found another gear and like just a whole nother thing. And by going for a week back home to Atlanta, I was losing a week of preparation getting into one of the busiest seasons of the year, right? And I would go over there, and then when we get home on Thanksgiving Day, it's not calm. It's not pleasant. I'm not going to say it's not pleasant. My family watches this. It's super pleasant. It's the best time ever. But we have to go to 4 Thanksgivings on Thanksgiving. You guys are familiar with this, right? One of those Thanksgivings I do too, I'm not going to make fun of anybody, but one of those Thanksgivings is outside. You're like, no, it's not outside. No, it's outside. It's that Thanksgiving is outside. We eat cold turkey that day. It's just one of the Thanksgivings that we go to. As we drive all around West Georgia, going to all the different Thanksgivings, we go over there. It's almost like we spend more time in a car than we actually spend with everyone else, right? And it makes you feel scattered. And it's like, I don't know if I want to feel that way going right before, the season when I need to be on, when I need to be strong and good and all that stuff and delivering the best sermons you've ever heard, right? That's right. And it had that feeling of scattering. I tried this in the first service and no, I didn't get anything. Was there anyone that watched The Office here? 4 of you. Listen. It's the ones that said yes, you are a holy bunch. A holy bunch. There will be mansions and pearly gates and all that stuff waiting for you, right? But sometimes when you work really hard on something and you're trying to give a gift to something and then it just all falls apart and it scatters all over the floor. There's a scene where this guy named Kevin makes chili for everyone. It's the most famous scene from The Office, and he trips and the chili just goes all over the floor. He made it for his entire working friends and all that stuff. And just his act of love just scattered all over the place. And it's awful. And many times when we feel scattered, we certainly don't feel comfortable. We certainly don't feel good. And this season can really leave you scattered as you go around to the different things and the different stuff. And so let's get back into what it says in Jeremiah. It says, woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. Well, who are those shepherds that he's talking about? They're not shepherds out in the field. That's the kind of Old Testament language for the leaders of God's people, the priests, the kings, all of those that lead God's people. He's saying, you guys have been bad shepherds. Woe to you, because you've scattered everybody. And then if we continue to verse 2, it's like, you have scattered my flock and have driven them away, and you have not attended to them. And what he's talking about there is that Jeremiah is talking about the Babylonian captivity, where Babylon has come and taken them over. And the way big empires back then, the way they would take over somebody is they would envelop them, take them out of their homeland, drag them, and disperse them about the empire. And the reason why they would do that is that if they could make them alone and disperse them about, then they would lose their identity as a former nation and become Babylonian. You see that? And so they would do that. It was their tactic. So it's all mentioning that. It's like, because you have been rotten, no good shepherds, you have scattered my flock all through there, right? And that's kind of a common image that happens around that stuff, that they have been scattered. But it doesn't really say what they did to cause this. What we have to do to look at it, we got to look at the context. We got to look into our knowledge, our banks of knowledge about what happened that caused God's people to be scattered. What did those shepherds do to be bad shepherds in order to scatter the people? And we see it at the very beginning of that story is when the people go, we want to be like all the other nations. We want a king. And then we see those kings, they'll do anything for power. They'll do anything to amass more and more and more, to gather more and more wealth for themselves, right? Even in our gospel reading, right after Jesus rides in to Jerusalem on a donkey, he goes up to the temple. And when he gets into the temple, he looks around and he's just enraged at what he sees. He sees money changers. He sees people selling doves and all these things. And he begins to turn over money changers and all that. And have you ever thought that story was weird? Yeah, well, let's see if you can look at it from a different perspective. Imagine you had Bill. No, I won't do Bill. We got a lot of Bills here. Dale. Dale's my favorite name, right? Well, you have Dale, and Dale's poor. Dale doesn't have much, and he works hard for everything that he gets. And he has his money, and he wants to make a sacrifice before the Lord of everything that he has. So he makes the trek with his little bundle of wealth that he has that he's going to give to the Lord. And he goes up to the temple. And he goes up there to buy a dove or something like that, to change money into the local currency or something like that. He goes up there and he has to haggle and barter and be nasty. You guys have all bought cars before, right? Even if you do get a good deal, you always feel like you're getting taken, right? It doesn't matter. The whole process is just dirty, which amazes me. Because never mind. I won't get into it. Because it's like, if there could be a dealer that just treated people with respect, they'd probably take over the industry, right? Which has happened in a couple of circumstances. But you always just feel like you're getting taken. Imagine having to go through that layer, go through a used car dealership in order so that you could give your sacrifice to God, right? And it's because everybody there that works in the temple is trying to get theirs. And they're trying to separate these people from their money just because they just want to be and have a good sacrifice. If you probably saw it, you probably get enraged too, right? And you look at that and you're like, that's not right. And that's what Jesus does. But that's the problem, is that many times our desires and wants for more causes us to hurt those around us or to scatter them. What also is interesting was when we feel scattered, when we feel like I don't know where up is, and I don't know which way is going. I just know that everything's against me. We begin to look for things in order to fix it, right? We begin to look for, I'll call it a strong man to fix it. And there's strong imagery of this all through here. We got the Babylonian, the image that Nebuchadnezzar had, the power of Babylon. That we feel scattered, and we begin to look for the strong men to fix it. It's like, fix my big problem here, right? Like the easy thing to pick on is politics. 4 years ago, we were all watching debates with about 150 Republicans on stage, all trying to become the strong enough man to say, I can fix it, right? This last week, the Democrats had another debate with 150 people on stage, right? All saying the same thing, like I can fix it. And we look and we feel scared at what's happening, and we're like, oh, we need to get the most strongest, most brutal guy or whatever like that. I don't know the language, but we begin to worship and bow down before the power of Babylon, right? We do this with our sickness too. Like there's nothing worse than going to the doctor. It's like, doctor, I'm having problems breathing, or my shoulder hurts or something like that. And the doctor looks you over and they poke at you and do some tests, and you come back like 4 weeks later, still struggling, and the doctor's like, I don't know what's going on with you. Like that, you're like, thanks. That's it, at least if you could tell me there's a demon inside of me, then I could do something to help it, right? Like that's we're over there. And the thing is when we're sick like that and we want to feel better, we begin to go and look for the more wild side of drugs, right? We're like, oh, there's a test out there. There's a drug that's not approved yet. Sign me up. Let's see if it works. Right? And we look for the strong man, the quick fix that's going to make me feel less scattered, right? Like we do this all the time. We have that burning feeling that something is not quite right, and here it is. And we end up doing this with our own sin too, where it's like, ooh, my sin is kind of causing me issues, and we self-justify ourselves, saying, thank God I'm not as bad as that person over there. I thank God I'm not as bad as those over there. We often seek the strong ones. And what's interesting to me is that we often make God into that too. We make God into that strong one. But let's get back to Jeremiah. He has kind of a solution for us and what this looks like, and it comes from our reading. It says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord. This is right after where he's talking about the bad shepherds. When I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he shall reign as king and deal wisely, and shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. And in his days Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely. And this is the name by which he will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. Now, if you're reading that, you're like, oh, I see all these bad shepherds that are scattering us. And then we look at this, and you think about the Messiah coming, you're like, ooh, Messiah is going to come in strength and power, and he's going to deal with all those things that I'm scared of. Like he's going to come in all the greatness and the majesty over there, lightning bolts shooting out of his eyes and fingertips, and just, dealing with everything there, right? Like that's how Jesus is going to come, or we'll call it the Messiah, because that's kind of the Old Testament thing. But how did Jesus come? In a manger, right? On the back of a donkey. Like it's weird. It's almost like dissonance. It's almost like, oh, that's weird sounding. It almost sounds like mustard seed, kingdom of God type of things. And we do the same thing. We do the same thing that those Old Testament people do when we talk about Jesus' second coming, right? We hear all the stories about Jesus' second coming, and we're like, Jesus is going to be on a big white war horse, and he's going to come with a sword drawn and coming right after, and he's going to take everyone, he's going to show everyone who's boss, right? And it's not hard to find this image. I searched on Google Images, Jesus' second coming, and I had a plethora of options. Here's one of them, and then there's another one just like it, right? And they're just filled, and they're all different, and you can look at them, and they all present Jesus as this big, mighty warrior that's going to come in and conquer and destroy everything, right? He's going to come and be that strong man that's going to finally show him who's boss. And something that's hit me in the last couple years is, why do we think Jesus' second coming is going to be all that much different than his first coming? Why would God change? You hear me? I've been confronted by that idea a lot lately. And here's the thing. Here's what's interesting. Because some of you are going, well, that's just a picture in Revelation of Jesus riding the white horse into battle and all that. But there's an interesting thing that part of the story that they're picking up in these, but they're not showing you correctly what's going on. All right? What color is Jesus, whatever this is, robe or whatever, he's right. What color is it? Red, right? Notice that in the other one, it was the same color, right? It's like red. Do you know why it's red? It's what? It's because of blood. It's because of blood. He's got blood on him already. But here's the thing. It's not anybody else's blood. It's his blood. He's going into battle already weakened by, as Christians, we know, the cross. He's going into battle already wounded. You see that? He's going into battle already in the weakness. And that's what John, the author of Revelation, wants you to see. And I think when we begin to look at it that way, we're like, oh, when Jesus comes, it may not look all that different from when he came originally. Because they all expected him to come in like Judas Maccabeus, the Maccabees. If you guys don't know what the Maccabees is, look it up. I've talked about it at length. Look it up. But it's people who came in and took over Greece and took Jerusalem back, right? And he came riding in on this big white war horse, and everyone thought the Messiah, Jesus, was going to be that, who's going to ride in on a big white war horse. Listen, and you look awesome when you ride in on a big white war horse. If I went outside and got on a white war horse that I had parked out by the shed that you guys didn't see coming in, and I came riding in on here, I would look svelte and awesome, right? That's right. You got like a sword hanging off the side, right? Look and you're like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've seen, like a giant animal in this tiny church. But Pastor sure looks amazing right now. That's all that stuff. But if I rode a donkey in here, you'd be calling the donkey something and calling me the same word, right? You guys all have dirty minds. But you're like, look at that, because it's impossible to look cool while on a donkey, right? You're just, that whole thing. I love that joke. I'm gonna say it all the time. But it's impossible to look cool on that. And yet that's what Jesus rode. He didn't ride on a horse of victory. He rode on a donkey. Right? He rode in to all the shouts of save us, save us, save us on a donkey. And he went on that donkey, went right up to the temple and turned over all the money changers because they were trying to separate people. They're trying to get more power and separate people, to separate themselves from all of that. But our God is one that goes down low and brings all the people together, who does these works of light, to quote our New Testament lesson today, does these works of light, of humbleness, to bring people up, to lift them up, not for us just to look up at the thrones, but have a God that actually lifts us up out of the mire and the murk. See, the line of David, this Jesus, the true Son of God, begotten, not made, born of a woman, he came to save us, and he was on the back of a donkey. And the first thing he goes to that day were the shepherds, outcasts of society that weren't allowed to be in the city at night. The shepherds, he goes to them first and says, this is how the Lord is your shepherd, humble and lowly. And when they saw him go to all of that and how he scattered all of their money changers and stuff like that, they immediately, the powerful shepherds of the day, immediately began to hatch a plot to scatter Jesus himself, right? And by the end of that week, they had scattered the shepherd king to the edge of a place called Golgotha, where they pierced him and hung him on a cross. And to the world that is scattered, you and me, that day and even this season can seem utterly hopeless. But we saw on this king riding on a donkey who rose again that he brought us hope. And while we all thought that he was scattered too far, that they had finally killed him, he was having none of it. And when they tried to scatter him, he just bent down and told a prostitute that she was loved and forgiven. When they tried to divide all of his stuff amongst themselves, he went to the table of sinners and ate with them so they would know that God is always inviting them to his table. When they tried to destroy his will, Jesus bent down and healed the broken. And when they tried to kill him and destroy the unity that he had made, he rose again, covering us all in the light of his life and bringing us all together. Jesus is the good shepherd who goes and brings the scattered flock in, who goes and comforts those who have been cast out and comforts those who feel lost and scattered. So, this Advent, when you're out walking around and you're in that line at Kohl's, which is way too long, when you're out looking around for things, when you're feeling scattered this Advent season, I want you to look for the one riding the donkey. I don't know what he's going to look like, and he may look different for each and every one of us, but I want you to look for the one riding the donkey. That may be Jesus right there, right? I want you to look for the one who was born in a manger. I want you to look for the one that's been hanging on the cross. And most of all, I want you to look for the one who's been raised to gather you back into the family of God, knowing that he is working to bring us all back together, to bring all of our scattered selves back, because his arrival is coming.